And if you were listening to Gary Bachman yesterday, you might remember the fruitcake recipe that he's been passing down through generations. I have also posted that there if you would like to go get it. And that got me tickled, or I guess it didn't get me. It got me tickled, but you're the one who brought it up, Ryno. That remember Gary mentioned that this recipe was from the 1950s. And so some of the ingredients are a little bit different than how they may appear in your local grocery store today. One being what, Ryno?
Seeded raisins.
Yeah.
It just, when I saw it, it immediately reminded me of, I have a little blue self-published Police Wives cookbook that my mom made sure she got a copy for each of her boys, and then when we went off to college and got our own place,
That's funny.
She handed it over. It had her name in it from the day she got it, and you flip through it, and it's got some of those old recipes with old instructions or measurements or just really old words for things. Like, for example, one of the recipes includes, and actually the chocolate chess pie recipe includes, a half an eggshell of milk as a measurement. Or you'll have a recipe that calls for oleo. Well, unless you grew up sometime before the 80s, you don't really know that oleo is basically fat.
Right.
It can be any kind of fat, but usually it's processed fat, like margarine kind of thing.
I just appreciate the half an egg. I'm going to guess that's 1 to 2 teaspoons or tablespoons.
It's a little different each time, and you got to be good at cracking the eggshell to get the right amount to get it just right. But I was racking my brain trying to think of other crazy measurements that I remember seeing in there. And I remember seeing all these different measurements for a cup, like a wine glass or a coffee cup or a cup, which wasn't really a cup. It was about a fifth larger the farther back you go in recipes and stuff like that, that while it's all written down, it's all clear-cut in black and white how to make it, you can still mess it up if you don't know the translation on some of these things.
Well, and you have to think, too, the recipes that have been passed down, I mean, there was probably a time, like right now, everyone listening to Good Things, if you went to your kitchen and you open a drawer, 9.9 out of 10 of us all have cup, 3/4, 2/3. Like they're standard. You can go to the dollar store now and get, a whole set of them for like for $1 or probably less. So, and you probably have multiple of those because they're now so widely available. There was probably a time where you didn't have all the different. You may have had a cup or you may have had the standard, but to get to the nitty gritty of them, and so grandma or auntie or whoever was doing the cooking, I mean, they just knew by their hands or by a pinch or by whatever, or
flip-flap.
or they had when you say that, my mother-in-law, she's got a thing for the flour that sits on the top of her counter, and it's not a measuring cup that's in there that she makes biscuits out of. I don't know what it is. It's a cup. I mean, it's a container, but it's the biscuit cup. I mean,
it's a scoop.
It's a scoop of the biscuit cup. I don't know if it was an old kid drink cup that came from God knows where, and then it just got to be this is the perfect amount, and it got kind of stuck in there. And so if she was to ever write down her recipe, she'd have to figure out what that was. And so, I mean, even with coffee, a lot of us don't actually have a coffee scoop in there. You've got something else that just you figured out that was the perfect measuring for your perfect scoop of coffee, and which for a long time was a tablespoon for us out of one of the measuring sort of things. Anyway, so yeah, that's kind of interesting.
I just got a text from a friend that I've let use. Nobody borrows it. I've let them use the Police Wives cookbook, and they reminded me that there is a recipe in there that calls for butter the size of an egg.
Butter the size of an egg.
Which apparently does translate to, I want to say it's 1/4 cup of butter.
Well, now you've got me. Okay, so you're thinking this was like back in the what? Your mom gave you this cookbook?
I mean, the cookbook was produced in the early 90s. I want to say 91, 92, but it was a collection of recipes from all the police wives for the Police Wives Auxiliary. They brought them together and made a cookbook to raise money. And some of those recipes have to be over 100 years old.
Right. And so when the first time someone says, hey, Granny, how do you make your egg parmesan or your, beef tenderloin or your fried steak, smothered in whatever? She's like, I don't, let me, an egg size of butter. I mean, come on now. But that's golden. That's great. Like, those are the things you have to stop and scratch your head and sort of think,